Please stay standing, and we're going to open up, as this is a church, we'll start with prayer. So Heavenly Father, we are so thankful that we can gather together in your name, and we just ask a blessing to come upon this evening. We pray that you will continue to lead us and guide us in the truth. We pray for wisdom. We pray for discernment. We just pray that your hand is upon everything that's about to take place. In your Son, Jesus, we thank you for all the blessings that you give us each and every day. And we just pray a blessing. In Jesus' name, everybody said, amen. Please be seated, and I'll invite all the candidates to come forward.
Hello everyone, welcome candidates, welcome everyone here, everyone watching at home on this live stream. My name is Leighton Gray. I'm going to be your moderator this evening. It's a privilege. I want to thank firstly the pastor and the congregation of this church in Tofield for making this venue available. Sadly, we live in a time and place in our country when Christian-sponsored public events are compromised and sometimes banned. And I thank God that we live in a province where, fortunately that's not the case yet. And so I'm very pleased that we can have this forum here in Tofield and with the three candidates who are present. You might be wondering what I'm doing here. But actually, I do have some connection to this riding. I spent 2 years, my first 2 years in university at Camrose Lutheran College, which doesn't exist anymore. But those are my 2 best years of university. And I once followed a girl here to Tofield to attend a dance, which just means that I have more connection to this riding than about 99% of the candidates. Full disclosure, I wasn't the first choice to be your moderator. I think that they wanted somebody who was better looking and more famous. But Justin Trudeau is attending space camp in Montreal with his new girlfriend. Then they thought, well, maybe this Bible thumping lawyer, he's not moderate enough to be a moderator. And so they were looking at somebody more moderate like Jeff Raff. But here I am. What I can promise is I am going to be at least as moderate as that French lady on CBC who looks like Benicio del Toro. I forget her name. It's important to remember, though, folks, tonight that politics is not life or death. Politics is real life, but it's not life or death. It's important, but what's important is, the things that really matter, and hopefully we're going to get the candidates to talk about those, the things that are most important to them. I'm looking forward to hearing from them about those. Also, full disclosure, I do have a particular bias in favor of a particular leader, and he's here tonight. He's the King of Kings. He's the Lord of Lords. And I mention that because, in the words of Christ, we are to love our neighbor. And so that even means that we're called to love our enemies. So you may not like what the candidates say. You may not like their parties. However, it's important that we show them due respect because they feel called to public service. We need to respect that. And we need to have a place and time in our country where we can have debate. We can say things that might trouble us. And so that's what we're trying to accomplish here. So I'd ask everyone here and I don't want to sound like a woke scold, but let's not have any catcalling or anything like that. We have to respect the people, and let's just have a wonderful evening with these three gentlemen and try to give all of you who are here and all those who are listening the best presentation, hopefully, of what their ideas are and why they're running for, they're trying to be your parliamentarian. So with that, I'd like to begin with the first question. And this topic, it deals with Alberta sovereignty and federal relations. And I'm going to pose this one to Mr. Abraham first, and then give the other two candidates a chance to comment. I know that the candidates are all aware of sort of the governing rules. We've got our timing here is going to keep you on point. I want the candidates to remember, though, that don't feel pressed for time, because we're going to make sure that after each of you has had a full opportunity to answer the question, that there's time for rebuttal, okay? So the first question now for Mr. Abraham. Premier Smith has lowered the threshold to trigger a separation referendum and promised to hold one in 2026 if enough signatures are gathered. Do you support or oppose holding a referendum on Alberta leaving Canada?
Good question. Well, I'll tell you what, it's good to be here tonight, and this is probably the most important question right now in Alberta and even in our country. And I am in support of a referendum, because a referendum is leading us to a public understanding of the actual issues that are confronting the country. And recently, as I've been speaking to Albertans, I've been having some fun with them, and I think tonight we have permission to have some fun and not be so serious. And you know what? I think what we've been as Albertans is people that have been standing on this boat called Canada, that we're not so sure we want to be a part. We've been paying $1 trillion, nearly $1 trillion since 1960, and we've been trying to decide whether we're going to tip our weight off. And we've now come to a place where we've been told that Canada is going to be a post-nation state, that it's going to be reset, and that it's riddled with foreign interference. And not only is the Liberal government drilling holes in the boat, the Conservative Party is not challenging any of those drill bits going through our boat. So when I look at Alberta sovereignty, and this is maybe a bigger conversation, I think to myself, you know what? We have to think about this in a bigger picture now than we did with red and blue, west and east, and all of those issues, and say, how long until that boat sinks? Because I believe the only way is to pivot, because Alberta is a beachhead for freedom in this whole nation, and we're the only people with the strength, the faith, the resiliency, and the wealth to actually set a beachhead up that can preserve the culture, values, and traditions of this nation. And if we do that, then Canada the rest of it, may actually join into the liberty that this nation was supposed to have and hold on to. And I think this is the pathway, and the referendum for me is one step, but there are other stronger arguments, I think, and maybe they'll come out in this discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Abraham. I'm going to modify the question slightly for Mr. Harris and ask you this. If a separation referendum passed with 50+1%, would you accept that result as legitimate, or should the government fight it in the courts?
So basically, the Libertarian Party of Canada has always supported the Canadians' right to self-determination since 1973. And I've been going around during this by-election talking to many of my neighbors, many of my other fellow communities, and going across the riding talking to the people of this riding. And many people feel that they are out of hope. They're out of money and they're out of time. A lot of people feel that if they are not granted support or their right to leave this country within the next couple of months or years, they will have to leave this country because they cannot afford to be here anymore. They cannot afford to run a business here anymore. They cannot afford to have a family here anymore. And as someone who wants to live in this province and in this riding for my entire life, I'm not only out here trying to fight for myself, but for my family and for my community. And I would like to see us get past 51% in a referendum on Alberta independence. And I would say it'd be legitimate. As it is a majority, it is the will of the people, and I would back it. Thank you.
So, Mr. Wellington, if you were elected, would you actively campaign against separation in a referendum, or would you remain neutral?
That's a very good question, Mr. Layton. Thank you for it. I think as an elected politician, I'd be almost duty-bound to remain neutral and let the people decide, and 50% plus 1, not 51%, but 50% plus 1 would be fine. The process would have to be closely monitored. There's been a lot of cheating in elections of late, to say the least, and so it would have to be closely monitored, but I know I'm answering the previous question. But so yes, I think I would remain neutral. I've decided leanings. If I was an elected official of a federal party like the Christian Heritage Party, I think I'd be duty-bound to remain neutral, but I mean, I would probably cast a vote for it. Thank you.
Okay. In light of that answer, In light of that answer, I'm going to give you the first opportunity to answer the follow-up question, and that is, presuming that Alberta would remain within Confederation, what two federal policies would you change to address Alberta's grievances without separation?
Number one is equalization. Needs to be addressed. It was what we have now was agreed to by Jason Kenney and Ralph Klein back in the day, and it was not a good deal. It's based on the last 3 years' performance, not on our situation today, and so that has to be reworked. And Alberta can't carry the rest of the country forever. That's the bottom line there. And on the second point, we'd have to address resource development, which the federal government thwarts every time you turn around. They will use dissenting voices in Manitoba or Quebec to thwart our best efforts to get our products to Tidewater and across the country. All that needs to be addressed. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mr. Harris, what policies would you change to address Alberta's grievances?
So primarily, my main object that I want to focus on is supply management. I've been going around to a lot of the people and a lot of the farmers in this riding that they have to dump hundreds or thousands of liters of milk or have to break thousands of pounds of eggs every single month just because the government doesn't let them produce what they want to produce. I believe that's a big policy for rural Albertans that needs to be abolished. If we are wanting to have cheaper food, cheaper poultry, and cheaper milk, then we should be allowed to produce the amount that we want to produce. And this goes hand in hand with our party's belief that we should have a free market and less restrictions on Albertan businesses.
Mr. Abraham, how would you respond to that question in terms of the policies that could be changed in Ottawa that might address Alberta's grievances within Confederation?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges that we have in Alberta and in Canada actually is that we all have a sense that we're losing the country that we love. And, you know, the truth is we paid nearly $1 trillion since 1960 because the money's here and because we're a kind-hearted and benevolent people. But what's happening right now is that the DNA of the nation is changing. The value system, culture, value, traditions are being eroded and disregarded. And we're signing treaties that enforce the changing of our governance from those that are elected to those that live somewhere else that you don't vote for. And so across a range of international treaties, your sovereignty, your ability to jerk the chain of the person that you elect, if we'll put it that way, is being lost. And one example that I'll cite for that, there are others, but one of them is the WHO, the World Health Organization's changing definition of what a pandemic is and the designation of what happens in the event that there is a pandemic. The health decisions won't be made by Alberta Healthcare. They will be administered by Alberta Healthcare. And so your elected officials aren't going to be necessarily making what the prescriptive changes are or treatments that you may have to undergo. And this is part of the erosion of what we are as a people, of the things that our troops fought for, the international treaties that we were actually a part of forming in terms of the Nuremberg Conventions. And this is where our country is being lost. And we fix that DNA, we fix those things, then we can talk about the money. And I think equalization would be number 2, because we can't be subsidizing other provinces that are so inefficient.
Thank you. From listening to your answers to these questions, gentlemen, I have the impression that there isn't a great deal of discord between your respective positions. However, this is an opportunity before we move into the next category of questions for rebuttal. Would anyone like to have an opportunity to clarify their position or distinguish it from that of the other candidates? Mr. Willerton? Mr. Harris?
Negative.
Well, I'll just treat my friend here, Mr. Willerton, as a federalist in lieu of Mr. Polyev not being here, and suggesting that there is a very clear policy in this by-election of continuing equalization, staying in a broken Canada with no discussion about the fact that it's actually broken, and telling Albertans that we're going to unleash our energy while he will not revoke the principles or the binding nature of the UN Paris Climate Accord. So I don't know how you stay in that international treaty and unleash our energy. So we really need to be interrogating these kinds of questions.
That last response by Mr. Abraham sort of segues us into the next topic, which is Prime Minister Carney's conflicts of interest. This is something that has been very much in the news, as all of you know. And so the question, we'll start this time with Mr. Willerton. Prime Minister Carney must recuse himself from decisions involving 103 different companies through a conflict of interest screen described as unprecedented in the modern era. Do you believe a Prime Minister with this many potential conflicts of interest can effectively govern Canada?
It's a good question. We've never faced it before. I think that anyone who lies on their application coming into the country should be expelled from the country. Anyone who lies on their application to be the Prime Minister and just says, I have some houses and some money, should be shown the door, quite frankly, and let alone be our Prime Minister. But anyways, I don't begrudge people their success, and I think successful people should be allowed to run for office, and anyone else, obviously. But it's a sticky situation, because I do believe in people's freedom to run, even if he spends 5 years in England or what have you. But he has created his lies is what is the reason that I think he shouldn't be there, and his position on everything. Thank you.
Mr. Harris, I'm going to modify the question slightly, but don't feel confined by my modification. Mr. Carney's disclosures show 574 separate stock holdings, with 91% headquartered in the U.S. Yet he claimed during the election campaign that he owned nothing but cash and personal real estate. Those are his words. Should voters have been told about these extensive financial interests before the last federal election?
Oh, absolutely. The real question we should be asking here is, what have the Liberals not lied about, if I'm going to be honest with you here? Like, we look at Carney's track record, we look at Justin Trudeau's track record. They've pretty much lied on every single policy point that they have came in with trying to run this country with. And they're trying to take advantage of a system that regular Canadians can't take advantage of. We want to be able to, as libertarians, advocate to lower your individual taxes so that you are able to keep your own money, while he is able to take advantage of that just himself. He's able to take that money and keep it in his own pocket, and while at the same time stealing every other cent out of all of your guys' pocket. That's ridiculous, in my opinion. Yeah, 100%. Every other Canadian should know that, and they should have known it before the election. Thank you.
Mr. Abraham, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who is one of your opponents in this by-election, states that Carney's election pledges line up with major Brookfield investments. How can Canadians trust that government policies aren't designed to benefit the Prime Minister's financial interests?
Well, one of the interesting things about this discussion for us as Canadians is that the reason Mr. Carney told us that he just had cash or whatever it is that he said that he had was because he had allegedly put his wealth and his authority over that wealth into a blind trust. And if you followed that discussion, you will have noted that Pierre Poilievre was talking about the fact that that blind trust wasn't really a blind trust. And so just to maybe answer the question that these two gentlemen have answered, I would say that Canada needs to know whether that blind trust was actually irrevocable or not. Because if it's revocable, then he still holds the equitable authority and control over that trust, and he has deceived Canada. But I don't think we've actually got the right answer to that question because we haven't asked the right question. And I think we need to start there. And of course, I think if there's interests like electric vehicles and that's driving decisions about what our carbon policy is in the forms of you making it so that you can't buy an F-150, then that is a conflict of interest. And when you link that into the carbon discussion that I just mentioned a moment ago about making sure that Canadians are limited in terms of their carbon production, but we're going to unleash our energy, all of these situations don't add up. And the challenge here for us is the Liberals are going to do what the Liberals are doing. We are all clear about that. And in many ways, you might criticize me for not actually attacking the Liberal Party. I'm not actually here to argue with the Liberal Party. I'm here to bring the light to what the Conservative Party is not doing that we think that they are. And that is where this nation's being betrayed. And that, we could have a whole forum just on those issues. And I think that's where the relevant conversation is. But I appreciate the question. Thank you.
By way of follow-up, Mr. Abraham, and we'll give the other two candidates an opportunity to answer this as well. In your view, should the Conflict of Interest Act be changed to require disclosure before someone becomes a candidate for Prime Minister?
Why would that hurt? I think so. If that's where you're going to be a leader of a party. It's pretty inevitable that that's going to be the case, and I think yes, it probably should. If that's the likely outcome. If it's from a party that it may not be the case that person's going to lead the nation in terms of being Prime Minister, maybe that's a different standard. But let's say yes.
Mr. Harris, you sort of commented on this earlier, but would you like to answer that question or clarify your previous response to this?
Well, I just generally agree. I think, honestly, I don't think it goes far enough. I think it needs to be transparent to not only to the candidates that are running for MP or for PM, but also includes their families as well, too. This is a very big issue in the United States where technically they're not committing insider trading because it's their families that are doing the stock trading on their behalf. So in my opinion, it doesn't need to be just the politicians that need to be transparent. It's also the families of these politicians that also need to be transparent as well, too. And I think as well, too, I mean, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but Mark Carney's wife is involved in his business. And she gets a very big dividend every single month because of that business. So I think it needs to be expanded farther.
Mm-hmm. That's a valid, yeah. You raise a valid point. In the United States, I've noticed that similar questions are being asked about politicians there, specifically Nancy Pelosi. Mr. Willerton, how would you restore confidence that government policies serve the public interest rather than private financial interests?
That's a good question. They have to be scrutinized, obviously, and the policies have to be about the people and not the globalists who are pulling the strings at the end of the day. And the effect on the poor. one thing that politicians have to keep in mind is the effect of their policies on the poor. When a tax increase is implemented, we have to think of the effect, the disproportionate effect on the poor, and so on and so forth. I'm not a socialist, but I believe that we need to look after those who can't look after themselves. And reduce the size, scope, and role of government so that more people can keep more money in their pocket at the end of the day. Thank you.
Mr. Harris, would you like to comment along those lines? What would you do if you were elected as the member of parliament for this riding to restore the confidence of the people, not only in this community, but around the country, in government, in terms of not serving their own private interests versus the public interest, which is really their job?
Well, I've been nailed on this, but I'll bring it up again. I've had this on my website, that I am not running for a pension. I am not running for a paycheck. I'm running to be your representative for free. I want to bring transparency and true representation to this riding without having to take money out of your own pockets. Because it's not like I'm just making a wage, like I'm working an actual honest-to-God job. I am taking money from taxpayer dollars. It's not coming from a private business. It's not coming from donations. It's coming from you. And in my opinion, that's in a completely immoral way to be paid. And if I'm elected, I would not take a wage. And if the government would force me to take a wage, I know someone said that on the live stream last night, what I would do is then donate all of my wage back to the constituency at the end of each month. Thank you.
Mr. Abraham, do you have any ideas about how to restore public confidence in the administration of government in this country?
My impression is that in the last 10 years, things have become incrementally worse. I think with the agenda that I'm talking about, this WEF agenda that is designed to deconstruct the nation, that it's going to continue to get worse. And one of the questions that I find myself talking to conservative Christians and conservatives about in this country is that when was the last time that you ever heard a conservative MP asking you or asking Justin Trudeau or Mark Carney, can you please explain what post-nationalism is to us? You use these words. What is a reset? You know, we don't understand what a reset is, what's happening to our country. And so I think that my commitment to you as constituents is that I'm going to tell you the truth. And actually, ultimately, I'm of the view now that our system has been broken to such a degree that it's irreparable. And when there's holes being drilled in the boat, my mandate is actually to work myself out of a job, because my intention is to see Alberta become a place that can be a beachhead for liberty and freedom and security for all free Canadians, starting with Albertans. And so that is a very clear intention, with the promise of telling you the truth, because I love this country. My family went overseas and fought for it, and we're having the wool pulled across our eyes right now in this nation because people aren't telling you the truth about what's going on at a deeper level. And I'll tell you this, it's not just about what's going on at Blue and Red and West and East in Canada. We now are facing a geopolitical reality because the Americans will not be comfortable with this nation descending into a post-nation state that has a value system that's very different from theirs, and they will not allow their northern border to be undermined by our reckless politicking.
Mr. Willerton, would you like to comment upon what Mr. Abraham just said by way of rebuttal?
I would only agree with it.
Okay.
What else is there to say?
Mr. Harris, how about you?
Well, honestly, I agree with it as well too, but the thing is that we're being screwed over and lied to on all levels of government, from all of the parties that are running this country. They tell us in one area that we have a constitution that guarantees our right to transparency. Well, they lie to us. They tell us half-truths, and they deliberately hide things that we won't find out until 40 years from now. They tell us that we have the right to assembly, and they get rid of our protests. They tell us we have the right to freedom of faith, and they shut down our churches and tell us that we need permits to go into a congregation. In my opinion, it's ridiculous, and across the board, we see corruption.
Again, Mr. Harris, you've given us a nice segue into the next topic, which is free speech and digital rights. And so I'm going to give you the opportunity to answer this question first, at least in this topic area. Bill C-63 died on the order paper, but included provisions for life imprisonment for hate-motivated offenses. Do you support legislation like this that critics say could create chilling effects on free expression in Canada?
Well, as libertarians, we absolutely oppose any restriction on the right to freedom of speech. In my opinion, I'm going to sound like a little bit of a liberal here, so be a little bit, have mercy on me here. But I do believe in a little bit of cancel culture. I believe that you have the right to freedom of speech, but not a freedom of consequences. If you say something that your neighbor is not wanting to hear, or if you say something that your community is not wanting to hear, that is something that you have to deal with as an individual. But you shouldn't be imprisoned or have your life taken away or your job taken away just because you hold an opinion. And I absolutely disagree with this federal government that for the last 10 years has been trying to silence all forms of freedom of speech, whether it just be a simple conversation, an insult, political ideas, or religious values. It's ridiculous, and we'll fight to end it as best we can.
Mr. Abraham, what is your position regarding Bill C-63 and other legislation like it that aims to restrict and violate the protected freedoms of Canadians?
Well, these, excuse me, these are inherent curtailments, restrictions on what our freedoms are. And there is already in our law a framework that enables the monitoring of people saying wrong things or damaging people's characters. There's no other way to see the intent behind Bill C-63 than it to be something that protects the government or what the government thinks should be happening in the country. And what's going on right now in this nation is worse than Bill C-63, because that bill kind of closed with the last government collapsing. There's a bill right now, I'm not exactly sure at the minute, I haven't checked where it's at, but Bill C-2 is coming through the legislature, and then Bill C-2...
It's through the Senate now.
It's at the Senate stage. So Bill C-2 allows the government to, without warrant, engage and open your mail, either digital or actual physical mail. And you know, when we start to move into these kinds of pieces of legislation, I interpret those changes in terms of what we should have as the charter protections that we observed being ignored, basically, at the convoy. I see these changes happening as being equivalent to emergency powers without the accountability or limitations of emergency powers. And for those that are watching, we've had all kinds of changes in the legal system that reveal this constant shift away from the law being a balancing act, even a balancer of justice, even with the government. And these pieces of legislation are coming down the pike like crazy. Bill C-5 is this economic advancement bill that Mark Carney's put in, but he defines basically that he can implement whatever changes he needs to, overriding municipal and provincial legal laws if it's in the best interest of the country. That's open to broad interpretation. That's a problem.
Mr. Willerton, your party has the word Christian in its name. Recently, a Christian musical artist from the United States has had trouble carrying on scheduled events in Canada, in places like Montreal and now Winnipeg and elsewhere. What is your party's position and what is your view about how to protect and preserve freedom of expression in Canada, which is clearly under attack?
Well, as a writer, of course, I believe in freedom of speech, and I don't believe anyone should be able to tell me what I can write as long as I'm not slandering anyone. And the party takes the same position. We need to live in we did once live in a free country where we had freedom of speech, and these things weren't controlled by our government. We have papers that are financed by the federal government, newspapers and so on. Our media is controlled by the government. They won't say a bad word about them, and they won't publish a bad word about them. They won't allow writers to question policies that are sacrosanct and so on, whereas we used to be able to do that freely. So we need to get back to the good old days when we had freedom of speech in this country and freedom of conscience and so on. Thank you.
Mr. Harris, another bill that the Liberals in Ottawa have been bringing forward is Bill C-11, which allows the CRTC to regulate user-generated content on platforms that should be free, like YouTube. Should the CRTC have this level of control over what Canadians see on social media? And if elected, what would you do about that?
Well, if I was elected, at bare minimum, I would be a voice to say, this is not right. This is not right that we are regulating and controlling as a free society what we can see online. It's not like people are viewing, it's not like this bill is trying to stop us from viewing harmful content, or it's trying to be something that we're protecting people from. No, this is just another avenue of control, so they can push their censorship, they can push their bias or their fake news. And frankly, as libertarians, we believe that if there's a private company that's running these social media platforms, it should be their dictation on how they run their platforms and how they run their guidelines. It shouldn't be up to a federal government to dictate and control a multinational corporation on what they want to have as their regulations. If you want to say, okay, fair enough, if it's posting something that's like, I don't know, something where like it's related to like murder or something like that, something like really, really crazy, okay, maybe you could probably see something in that, but that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening here in Canada. This is just a blatant attempt to censor, and censor. Thank you.
Mr. Abraham, would you like to comment on Bill C-11?
Well, again, these bills are blanket bills that benefit the government. One of the things that you learn to figure out when you read pieces of legislation is who's benefiting. And we have lots of other laws that protect people that should be protected, like the nation, sedition laws, or children, etc. And those laws are not ineffective, and yet we're bringing this legislation out to curtail our liberties. And you maybe just take a little bit of time here to answer one of the earlier questions on this in terms of how the question was posed. And I think you said something about the degree to which our freedom of speech and expression has been limited in this country. I would say that in many quarters, the level of freedom of speech and expression has not been limited, because we now have Palestinians marching around in Canada, burning our flag and calling for the death of Canada. And so clearly there's very free expression in Canada. The comparison is Mr. Foyt, who clearly got his permit set up, and it was very clear who he was and what he was doing. And now there's been a whole scheme of revocations of his contracts because he is basically pro-life and wants to advocate for the health of women. And how that gets turned and labeled and twisted by our media is part of, I think, the more nuanced discussion that's going on. There is actually a targeting of the traditional values in this nation, and maybe some of you saw the recent clip where the RCMP officer was talking about what defines extremism, and she actually got to the place where she explained that someone who moves into strong traditional values is an extremist. And this is the inconsistency and inequality of this conversation, and these are the things that we need to fix and talk about, and we're not.
By way of follow-up, Mr. Abraham, the ostensible purpose of Bill C-63 when it was first introduced by the Trudeau government was to protect, it was essentially child protection. Would you support splitting online child protection measures from hate speech provisions, as some critics have suggested, to avoid overreach into the realm of free expression?
Yes, I think that's one of the exceptions that I would be identifying and saying we don't want people fomenting hatred about our nation or undermining the values of the nation. We want to protect our children. We don't want to have online pornography. We don't want the trading in that in relation to pedophilia. Of course, those things are exactly what needs to be protected. But when we use those things as a banner to shrink or limit all of the other liberties that we should have in the country, that's the problem, and that's actually the intention behind it. I mean, and this is exactly the scenario that happened with the conversion therapy bill, Bill C-4. That's the bill that will criminalize each and every one of you in this room if you try and stop your child going trans. And we need to recognize that that bill was passed unanimously by the Conservative Party of Canada by unanimous consent motion. If one Conservative MP had said no to that bill would have stopped and had to go through all three readings. But what we've got now, and by the way, let me just clarify when I say this is the language game that's played. The conversion therapy is not the child being converted from its heterosexual identity to another understanding of gender in their mind. The conversion therapy is the parent trying to realign the child in its mind to its birth sex. But you as a grandparent, pastor, parent, you try and engage that discussion and the school or a social worker finds out about it, that's up to 5 years in prison. People now who are actually molesting children are getting less than 3. And I'm not okay with that, and that's one of the reasons why my conservative values want to conserve the integrity of parental authority and the innocence of our children. That's conservatism.
You jumped the shark a little bit, Mr. Abraham. We'll be coming to that question a bit later. So you will have the opportunity to comment in more detail on that topic, as will the other candidates. Mr. Harris, how would you strengthen Canada's efforts to protect children from online sexual exploitation and trafficking?
My problem is with pushing these type of regulations in the first place is you got to think of it as like a pipeline. At one hand, you think wanting to restrict what you see online is a good thing. It stops our children from being able to see bad things that they probably shouldn't be seeing. It also probably stops a lot of criminals from being able to do a lot of online activity. However, you've now just given a smoking gun to the government to do exactly the same damn thing to you on anything it desires. We see this in the United Kingdom where they say that it's just for one thing. It's just to ban pornography for children to see. And then they proceed to ban what you can or cannot post or see on Facebook. And it keeps going on and on and on until at what point do we say that we shouldn't give the government the power to control that? That's where I would disagree with it because, like I said, at what point do you see the government finally drawing a line and saying, this is where we're going to stop? Because most of the time, they don't. And you've just now given them the power to do it whenever they want. Even if a good government comes in and says, okay, for the next 4, maybe 12 years, we'll run it as a good platform. Okay, well then what happens when the Liberals come back in? Now you've just given them that same power to take away your rights to see what you see online. And I just see it as ridiculous. So the real question is where do we draw the line and how long can we keep it that way without other governments and other parties from taking advantage of those bills? Thank you.
Mr. Willington, Mr. Harris is just commenting on governments essentially encroaching into privacy and restricting the freedom of Canadians. One of the ways that they're doing that is by expanding digital surveillance powers, and they've been doing this through various forms of legislation and regulation in recent years. How would you balance national security needs with Canadians' privacy rights?
Well, I am deadly opposed to digital IDs and central bank digital currencies and so on, means by which they would track us and keep and know where every move. The candidate who isn't here, who had time to knock on doors here this afternoon but didn't have time to be here with us, once said that he opposed digital IDs, or the imposition of, I forget what he was talking about, digital IDs or CBDCs, but they're so closely related, it could have been either. But his party, the Digital ID and Authentication Council of Canada was established by the Tories in 2012. So, I mean, talk is cheap. And, so I'm all about freedom. I'm all about promoting freedom, freedom to write, freedom to see what you want to see with limitations, obviously. Thank you.
Mr. Abraham, if elected, how would you protect Canadians from government overreach in digital surveillance and data collection?
Well, I think it's just a live context out of the build-up to the federal election. We had President Trump asking this country, with the threat of tariff, with the attached ask, to clean up human trafficking and fentanyl production and tighten up our border. And the response of the Conservative Party in that scenario was to say we're going to have retaliatory tariffs. And what we tend to have learned to do in Canada is listen to the storyline rather than actually looking at what happened. In that case, and I'm coming to the answer to your question, what happened in that case was that the policy that the Conservative Party was setting was actually causing Canadians and their businesses to suffer because tariffs were going to be implemented because we wouldn't engage the cleanup of human trafficking and fentanyl production in Canada. And we've got to look at these transactions that are going on in the political realm and actually understand that there was a choice made to protect organized crime. So when we talk about digital surveillance, I think we need to maybe rethink our criminal application of justice and enforcement and say, do you know what, maybe we need to just start talking about redefining what crime is, put it into a new category called organized crime, define organized crime as terror, because that's what it is, and then start to release our enforcement mechanisms to have fast-tracked warrants for surveillance. That's dealing with the problem that's eroding our country. It's not overlaying a blanket, a smothering blanket of the loss of your privacy as everyday citizens. And most of you in here probably have never had a speeding ticket in your life. So this is the problem. We're using a hammer to break an egg. And it's just the wrong response. So we've got to look at the problem and fix it. That's how I approach that.
Mr. Harris, as a libertarian, what is your position on cryptocurrency regulation and central bank digital currency, or CBDC? And how does that position differ from that of the other parties, either your present opponents or other opponents who are absent?
Well, in my personal opinion, I still support fiat currency somewhat. I still believe that we should have a gold standard backed dollar here in Canada. I know probably a lot of my other fellow libertarians that are watching this stream would probably be saying that we should go and support Bitcoin. But my problem is that when I have a currency, I want stability. I want my currency to not have inflation. I don't want to have to go to the store and have to pick a day on when I want to actually buy food, because one day it's $5, one day it's $2, one day it's almost $15. I want it to stay the same for as long as possible, for as best as possible. And the problem is what we're dealing with in this country is our currency is not really highly valued. And we can see in our store shelves where that price of our goods is going up by each month. I don't see it going down. I keep seeing it go up. So we need a better currency reform, and we need to continue to increase the value of our currency, whether that means backing it on a gold standard like I would suggest, or supporting other alternatives like Bitcoin. Thank you.
This is a very important topic, and so that's why we spent a fair degree of time on it, and I appreciate the detailed and thoughtful answers that all of you have given. Is there a desire on the part of any of you for rebuttal to anything that your opponents have said? Mr. Willerton? Mr. Harris? Mr. Abraham?
I would just say, with regard to the comments there on central bank digital currency, I would say that that's a part of the digital cage that is being created. If the government has anything to do with the fungibility or usefulness of those funds, It's not a good idea. And what is happening, though, and I think that we need to be aware that there are other forms of digital currency that are being created. In fact, the Americans are establishing those as free movement on a blockchain. That's a very different conversation than central bank digital currencies. And so blockchain digital currencies I'm in support of because it does provide that security. And I do agree. We're going to have to really look at our fiat currency because we can't even really tell what our Canadian dollar's worth because we can't actually establish what our national debt is. So we have a big problem here.
So we're moving on to our next topic, which I dare say might be the most important one to the people watching and listening here, and this is life and family values. From your earlier answers, you've all expressed concern about loss of our values, or at least to some degree destruction of them or attack of them, traditional values I'm speaking of here. So the first question we're going to start this time with Mr. Abraham. What is your position on abortion, and would you support any restrictions on abortion access, particularly late-term procedures?
There's only 2 countries in the world that have no abortion law right now, as I understand it. It's North Korea and Canada. We have a completely uncivilized position on abortion. We can abort at birth. It's a disgusting reality. And this is a very sensitive issue, and I'm very aware of the realities that are facing young women that are faced with unwanted pregnancies. I am very encouraged by what I see the government in Hungary doing, which is actually establishing an economic value to life. And so I'm going to answer your question in a moment, but I think we need to look at this because we get drawn into these binary conversations, and if we started to put a value on life and have young women have the support, we start to move away from the need for that vulnerability to exist, and where young women can feel supported. And what Hungary's doing, for example, is if a woman under 20 has an unwanted pregnancy, they're given tax-free status until they're 30 to have that baby and raise it. And it compounds. With the second child, it's till they're 40. With the third child, it's till 50. And if there's 4 children, it's tax-free status for life. And there's a range of economic principles like that actually enhance the value of actually building your population and establishing life. And I think we need to start to look at those things rather than saying no. But having said that, I think that the abortion issue is abhorrent. And we talk about the woman's right to choose. Ultimately, the woman does have the right to choose. We can talk about the odd exceptions. And so I'm opposed to abortion, and I'm opposed to our healthcare system calling it healthcare when we're actually killing our future generation. And so there's all kinds of nuance here. I have 2 minutes, but I hope that gives you enough insight into where I'd be going in terms of legislation.
Mr. Harris, as a libertarian, I suspect that your answer to this question might be slightly different. And so if you don't mind, I'm going to leave you to the end and turn to Mr. Willerton first. See the way I did that? Mr. Willerton, what is your position on abortion, you and your party?
We're opposed. And we believe that the personhood should be extended to the child in the womb. Not at viability, what anyone might conclude was viability, but really the child in the womb is a human being when the first cell divides, and personhood should be extended to them, and laws should be enacted to protect them. There is no valid medical reason for abortion. There isn't. They just don't exist. And again, it's going to amount to a virtual ban on abortion. There is one case I can think of where, in the case of an ectopic pregnancy, I have a hard time pronouncing that, ectopic pregnancy, where a child doesn't have a chance to live. But outside of that, everything should be done to protect both the mother and the child, both human beings. in this case. Thank you.
And now, Mr. Harris, what is the libertarian approach to abortion law in Canada?
Well, this has been a universal belief that libertarians have held since its inception, since 1973, for our party's standpoint, that politicians should not dictate bodily autonomy on any level. It should be a decision both on the mother and on the doctors that are making those decisions, not the politicians, not the bureaucrats, not the people that are writing the pieces of paper. It's up to us as a society to make those decisions for our own selves. Now, while I am personally pro-life in how I live my life, I believe that it's inherently wrong to give politicians the right to control what is either coming out of your body or coming into your body. And if we give politicians and bureaucrats control over that, it's not just going to start with abortion. We've seen this in the States. We've seen this here in Canada. You give them the power to control what can or cannot come out of your body, and suddenly now we have passport mandates where, guess what? If you don't get a vaccine, you're not allowed to go to the store. You're not allowed to go to school. I almost wasn't allowed to go to university because I was told that I couldn't get it unless I had a vaccine. And that's what the problem is. You give governments, you give politicians these control, and they'll run a mile with it. So you can still have your own personal beliefs. You can still keep fighting for that. You can fight that through a societal lens, but you don't want to be giving the politicians that very well will be turning around that back on you as much as that you think that they will come to your aid. Thank you.
Mr. Abraham, I'm sensing the bubbling of a rebuttal on this question. Would you care to respond?
Well, I really enjoy this conversation with libertarians, especially ones that have a value framework that's similar and it's expressed to mine. But it's quite interesting that we're actually having this conversation, because if you listen closely to my friend's comments here, the root of his argument is that there's no value in the in vitro life. And that just gets glazed over when you hear a libertarian having this conversation. I find it quite interesting because there are cases now coming out of the US where an egg and a sperm that have been joined together in vitro in a test tube are given legal rights because they're defined as property. So suddenly in this conversation we have a scenario where human life, albeit not in a woman's body, has legal status because someone owns it. So as soon as you make that argument, how do you glaze over the issue that there's actually inherent value in a baby that's maybe only conceived in 3 days or 3 weeks? These are things that we need to talk about, and so this is the conversation. And when we have courts starting to recognize the validity of life within a test tube, it becomes very hard to discard it so cavalierly in terms of a woman's body, because what about the separate genetic coding of another human being that happens to be within a woman's body? And I think we have to look at this a little more carefully, and it's not so black and white.
Mr. Willington, do you care to comment on whether or not it is the role of government to protect the unborn?
I'm happy to, and of course I believe it is the role of government to protect everyone, including the unborn. And I think, to rebut my neighbor's comment, comparing an abortion to, or a child in the womb to a shot in the arm is oranges and apples. There's no relation there whatsoever. And but appreciate the attempt you made at logic. Thank you.
Canada, not only along with North Korea, has the most permissive abortion laws, we're also world leaders in medical assisted death. Canada's MAID legislation has expanded significantly in recent years, really prompting concerns about the concept of eugenics. Now the government is presenting or about to present legislation that could potentially allow young people to end their own lives without the knowledge or consent of their parents. So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Harris. Do you support the current scope of MAID, or would you advocate for changes to better protect vulnerable populations in Canada?
Absolutely not. I do not support our current station on MAID right now. It is a government-subsidized death trap right now. It is using your public funds, your public tax dollars, to basically kill and euthanize this country. Now, in my personal opinion, I've worked in social groups before. I've talked to people before that have had social issues, depression, all those type of above. If we are going to use our tax dollars to support our community, it should be going to support the areas that are actually affecting these people, whether that be helping with rehab, helping with giving everybody a proper therapist, or giving people the proper channels to be able to bring up their frustrations. That's a very valid use, in my opinion, of our tax dollars, instead of going to a literal death machine, in my opinion. Thank you.
By way of clarification, Mr. Harris, are you saying that the Libertarian Party is against medical assisted dying per se, or only the government's involvement in it?
I'm against it in its entirety, 100%.
Then just again, by way of follow-up, how then would you reconcile your party's position on abortion versus its position on MAID? There appears to be an inherent contradiction. So I ask you to comment on that, and I'll turn it over to your opponents to get their thoughts.
Oof. So that's definitely a difficult one to answer. I'll give you that. But
This is why Paul
yeah.
here didn't come.
Yeah, no, he wouldn't answer those questions. 100%, 100%, because we know Pierre Paul isn't going to come here and answer those difficult questions. And I know I might not have all the answers here, and that's what most libertarians believe. We don't have all the answers. We don't want to make that decision for you. We want you, as an adult, to make those decisions for you. I don't want the government to come in here and promote a death machine to you and your family. If I want to, if I had a choice, I'd want us to be able to have support. I am pro-life, like I said before. I would want children to keep being able to live in this country. But at the same time, you can't be giving politicians these power to take over and control your lives, whether it be through a death machine or through abortion. You can't have that. And people need to be able to make those decisions for themselves, not a politician, not a bureaucrat. So you are an adult. You're in control of your life. You make your decision for yourself, not me.
Mr. Abraham, what do you think about the idea of people having the ability to end their own lives with or without government assistance?
Well, this ultimately is a question about the sanctity of human life, isn't it? Because it's not about the freedom to kill yourself. It's about the inherent societal value of life and whether people should be allowed to lawfully terminate it. Our system has, for our lifetimes, up until recently, been that we have not been able to hasten death. And we have tremendous hospice care that allows a very compassionate and dignified death as people pass. But what we're doing right now is we're creating a hopeless situation in our nation so that people are facing the position where they're actually wanting to opt out of life because that's just easier. And this is, again, I think this is one of these issues where we have to look at what's going on. This is one of the holes that's being drilled into the little boat that I was talking about earlier. It's this disconnection of the value of human life and the fact that our government is actually quite open to allowing you to accelerate your death to get out of the way. And this is what actually Marxism wants to do. It wants to strip you of your individual identity as being created in the image of God and having inherent value, and turning you into a widget in a collective order. And this is where this conversation needs to happen. So if there is a sanctity of life discussion, and we say, yes, we are valuable, you are my neighbor, therefore I want the best for you, I'm going to want to see that you're cared for and not just making a bad decision perhaps at one of the weakest times in your life. And I've heard people commenting on this issue where they said, wow, I went through a rough spot in my life 14 years ago, and if there had been MAID around, I wouldn't be here now, and thank God there wasn't. And this is the problem.
Mr. Willerton, would you care to comment on the issue of MAID?
I'd be happy to. Thank you. there's a time to be born and a time to die. And we are wrong to artificially extend life on machines, but we're even more wrong to advance our date of departure. God has our life planned, and we're wrong to take that control out of his hands. When MAID came about, what year was that? 2016? Okay. There were regulations around it, stipulations and rules that basically softened the sale for us. But over time, they are dropping off, and that has happened everywhere in the world where MAID has been implemented. It's part of the program. So they give you the soft sell, and then they drop it off, and sooner or later, 12-year-olds who lost their girlfriend can go and apply for it without their parents' permission and part this world. It is a sad state of affairs. It is an absolutely evil system that we're dealing with, and we have to stop it. That's why the Christian Heritage Party exists. We saw it back in the 80s when we came into being, and we have been fighting the maddening trend towards the left and communism and so on and so forth ever since. And we're going to keep fighting. Thank you.
I have the sense that you gentlemen have all had essentially a chance to issue rebuttal on that topic. So if there's no objection, I'd like to move on to the next topic, which is trade and economic issues. And we'll start this time with you, Mr. Willerton. President Trump has threatened tariffs and imposed tariffs on Canada, and he's even joked about annexation of our country. How would you protect Alberta's trade relationship with the United States?
It's a good question. I'm not a trade lawyer. But I think you don't want to go in there with your chest all puffed out and think you're a tough guy dealing with Donald Trump. He doesn't like that very much. And I think we have to understand that he holds the cards, and I be somewhat cooperative and not pick fights and not go in with elbows up and on and on. It's ridiculous what's happening in this country. Obviously, it's not working. So we need to understand that we are the junior partner here and act accordingly. No, not like Mark Carney.
Mr. Harris, I'm going to modify the question slightly. Many of the constituents in this riding are rural people, agricultural producers. What would you do about the crippling Chinese tariffs that are not being talked about enough, and how they're impacting Canadian agricultural producers?
Well, first of all, I'm just going to say that I'm assuming I'm talking from a perspective that I would be the Minister of Foreign Affairs or Minister of Foreign Trade, but as an MP, or if I was even in that position, my basic assessment would be to look at the person that we're dealing with here, whether it be Trump, whether it be China, any of these people. Most of the time, they probably don't want tariffs on our industries. They just want something out of us. And most of the time, especially here in Canada, they want us to get rid of supply management so that we can have equal and fair trade with our trade partners. And we see this with our canola. We see this with our milk. We see this with our eggs, where they are limiting trade with us because we won't play fair. We like to say that it's Donald Trump who's the aggressor, and some might be right on that. But honestly, Canada has been the aggressor for probably the past 20 years in how we conduct our trade, where we're trying to be the big guy by making our business look so great when really we're actually hurting our own businesses with policies such as supply management or limiting our access to proper infrastructure. A lot of the areas in this area don't have access to proper water production. And a lot of these areas, they have to irrigate their own fields. And if they don't have aquifers under their farms, well, they have to pump that in. And the government, if they say that they're promising to take your tax dollars and do it, then, well, they're left behind because they're not allowed to install their own pipelines. They're not allowed to be able to pump it from their neighbor unless their neighbor gives them permission. So their farms go wilt and they lose their land. And that's what we've been seeing across this riding. And in my opinion, we need to give back control to our farmers and to our country to allow us to freely trade and for us to produce what we want to produce. Thank you.
Mr. Abraham, do you agree that Canada needs to diversify its trading relationships to reduce dependence on any single market? Or do you think that the better approach is to foster better trade relationships with the United States and Mr. Trump?
I wish I could answer both of those previous questions, but I'm going to answer this one.
You can if you'd like to.
Yeah, it's just that I want to honor the question, but I think there's such huge conversations there. So if we get time to revisit that, I'd love to. But diversification is always a good thing. We know that. But the reality is the substantive trade that we have as a nation, and particularly Alberta, is with the United States. So it's always good to diversify for sure. But, part of that, the seed of the other question that was asked is what do we do with Trump? Because Trump is implementing tariffs, not because he's not fully happy with our economic policies. I'm sure there are economic trade issues that he doesn't like. But again, he's asking us to deal with value issues and organized crime. And so for me, this is obviously a federal issue, and my answer is one that relates to really what my platform is, which is our country is broken. We have an activist Supreme Court. We have a two-tier criminal system, and the system that we function in as a province in this nation is broken. We need to lose the crown. We need to move to a constitutional republic. We need to establish inalienable rights within that constitutional republic that protect our individual citizens, and it's not going to be changed by activist Supreme Courts. And then we allow our people to prosper and flourish and establish the kind of trade relationships that we need to do. We need to function and grow with. We need to do a lot of things in terms of trade. We need to repatriate our industry. We bought in to this concept of manufacturing being shipped overseas, and we shipped off all our jobs. Now we can't make anything. This touches education. It touches entrepreneurship. It touches foreign direct investment that we don't have and are losing. So there's so many pieces to this conversation on trade. But a big facet of it is, again, one of the other questions, what is Trump looking at when he sees Canada? And he sees a threat at the northern border because they're concerned that Canada is destabilizing.
Mr. Willerton, would you care to comment on what Mr. Abraham has just said?
I'd love to talk about the issue of tariffs. We had our first tariff in Canada on July 1st, 1867. We were born with them because we were a fledgling country, a baby country, with similarly baby companies up against a 100-year-old behemoth to our south. And our companies didn't stand a chance in a tariff-free zone, free trade zone. So there were tariffs, and they were necessary. Today, we have American farms that produce more of products A, B, or C than some of our entire provinces. So again, if we didn't have tariffs of some kind, they would be able to undercut, like sell their product at a loss if they had to for a while, drive our farmers under, and a country that can't feed itself will not long be a country. So we need tariffs. The only question is what level they should be at. I'm not talking about supply management, I'm talking about tariffs.
Mr. Harris, what's your view on tariffs?
Well, we support free trade in its entirety. A lot of our businesses here in Canada want to be able to not only trade domestically here in Canada and to our neighbors, but also to gate in and take advantage of the big cash cow market that is the United States and or the People's Republic of China. There's a lot of people that are living in both of these countries, and there's a lot of people that want our goods. And when we put tariffs on a country, well, guess what they're going to do? They're going to put tariffs right back on us. And that limits what private businesses are allowed to sell and who they can sell it to. Because a regular Joe from this riding, there's not too many big businesses that live in this riding, are not going to be able to compete with big businesses that maybe can afford that fine. And so if you're a smaller business that maybe has a oil rig on your farm, or you want to be able to ship your milk to Seattle, you can't do that now because the government has effectively stopped you from being able to sell your goods to other countries unless you pay a higher price. Ultimately, freer trade helps both sides because if I want something from the United States, I can get it for cheaper. And if the United States wants something from us, they can also get it for cheaper, which helps both sides. It's not just a game of Canada first, everybody has to take advantage of here in Canada, but how can we both benefit? And free trade benefits everybody. And in my opinion, there's very little downsides to not wanting tariffs. Thank you.
Mr. Abraham, Mr. Harris supports free trade, but I can't help noticing that free trade is one of the central pillars of globalism. Would you care to comment?
Well, this is the challenge, because what happens, and I alluded to it there, within a free trade system, is that you move your manufacturing offshore and your actual skill-based knowledge offshore as well. You don't move the employees, you move the operation. And what happens is, after 20 years, you lose all those skills, and then you become dependent and not self-sufficient. And this country was built on self-sufficiency and can-do. And so what we did was we imported that off because jobs in China were incredibly cheaper. And so the problem now is that jobs in China are not incredibly cheaper. And what we need to be looking at is, what is the tariff on canola? The last time I checked, and I'm taking a risk here because I don't know the exact number, but I think it's 100%.
I think that's correct.
I think that's correct. So the question is, why aren't we having a serious conversation with China about why we have a 100% tariff on our canola? And one of the challenges is, I think, that there's a much bigger conversation going on in the shape of foreign interference. And we've been told that there's ample evidence of severe and sustained foreign interference. And we've just had an election with 11 MPs in this country that we don't know who they are, but they're either agents or under the influence of foreign interference. And my guess is that some of those people touch upon or concern China. And again, we can talk about these symptom issues, or we climb into the root issues. And this is where I'm talking about telling you and promising to tell you the truth of what's actually going on.
Thank you, gentlemen, for those thoughtful answers on that topic. I propose to tackle one further topic and then take a short, about a 10-minute break. The next topic is one that Mr. Abraham had sort of wandered into earlier, which is fine. It's religious freedom and conscience. And so I'm going to start this time with Mr. Willerton. How would you protect religious freedom for individuals and institutions who hold traditional beliefs about marriage, family, and sexuality?
I think that people should be free to believe that God is the jolly green giant or whatever they want. But if they have traditional views, why would I have any problem with that? I have traditional views, and if they have untraditional views that I have issues with, I don't think that we should be supporting same-sex couples. I think we should revert the definition of marriage. I'm going to touch on this in my closing comments, but the definition of marriage should revert to that relationship that exists between a man and a woman, one man, one woman, together for life, and the family being they and their children. So I certainly wouldn't object to people having traditional values. I don't know exactly where you want me to go with that.
Well, I think you orbited the answer but didn't quite get the landing gear down.
Okay,
So I'm going to give you a chance to
Quite
clarify.
possible.
The question was, how are you going to protect these freedoms, because we know that they're under attack?
By protecting religious rights and people's freedom to live their lives the way they choose within the confines of the law. And traditional values should always be within the confines of the law in this country.
Thank you. Mr. Harris, what's the libertarian position in this regard?
Well, in this regard, as you probably could expect, we believe in the individual's right to choose their own lives. And a lot of the times we see here in this country that this government and this party, that is, we call that the Liberal Party of Canada, is wanting to limit our religious values here in our country. They want to limit it. They want to put permits on it. They want to tell us that we can't go to church unless the government says yes. And guess what? If you give them the power to do exactly the opposite, well, no, like I said, once again, we go back to the pipeline theory again. Once again, you're giving them the power to take away the same rights that you want to take away from others. That's why libertarians believe in individual sovereignty. We believe that you're an adult. You know what's best for you. Your community knows best for you. Your family knows what's best for you. A politician sure as hell doesn't. And so you need to make that decision on your own. Like, a politician can't tell you who you love, and a politician can't tell you how to live your life. And that's been our politician, or our statement and our belief since 1973. Thank you.
Without restricting your ability to comment on what your opponents have said, Mr. Abraham, I'm going to modify this question slightly to sort of softball this into the question you were trying to answer earlier. Should parents have the right to seek counseling for their children struggling with gender identity issues? Because as you know, religious groups worry Bill C-4's definition could capture parents, pastors, and counselors who teach a biblical understanding of sexuality.
Well, I'm going to come back to that in the second half of my answer and answer this question here in the first minute. My answer to this is that we have a nation, God keep our land glorious and free. We sing it, we just sang it. The preamble to our charter is basically this country is founded upon the supremacy of God and the rule of law. And what's happened in the last 40 years, maybe longer, is that we've unplugged our value system from the supremacy of God and the rule of law. And when you do that means that you're a nation that can say no to you can't say no to anything. And that's why we have people marching around in the country calling for the death of our nation and burning our flag. And so I think what we need to do, if you want to answer this question about what do we do to reestablish the values and in fact the values that we want to live by and with, is that we replug our value system back into the supremacy of God and the rule of law, define that God, and that God's been generationally defined. We didn't name him in the preamble, but that's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's the Christian God. And you know, I don't have to make too big an argument about this. It's not a Christian argument per se, because Jordan Peterson is actually telling, tens of millions of Canadians that the values that flowed out of the supremacy of God and the rule of law were good values. They built the best nations and the best economies in the world. And so what I say to people out there when I talk about this is I say exactly what I've said to you right now. But I say, the best thing about my understanding of God is that he gives you the absolute right to not choose him. And that is the framework for our religious freedom in this country. And I think that everyone, libertarians included, should be fighting for that, because that gives us the ability to say yes and no to the things that offend our culture, values, and traditions. And that's why we're not having a conversation in this nation about the compatibility of militant Islam with our culture, values, and traditions. And I'm not just picking on Islam. So that's how we do it. We've got to start talking about these issues again from a value framework that resonates with a lot of Canadians, and not be so afraid of this lie that's been told about this separation of the secular and the sacred. Because I'll tell you what, the government is bringing a very clear agenda in terms of a force that's undermining our nation, and we're being muted because we think we're good Canadians not talking about things that have values that emanate from faith, that built this country and are still embedded in our Constitution and Charter of Rights. So let's have those conversations.
You want to clarify? Well, we're going to come back after about a 10-minute break and give you the opportunity to do that, as well as to hear from the other two candidates. So 10-minute break. Thank you. Harris, would you like to go first, talking about this issue of, making stronger laws to protect religious freedom, have marriage and family and sexuality in Canada? Would you care to comment?
Well, we believe as libertarians in something called negative freedom, or freedom B, which is the belief that we should have freedom from the government or other entities that wish to control or regulate those laws or rights. Whether if you're in belief of positive freedom, which is the belief that you should have someone to make those laws on your behalf to give you freedom. Well, I disagree with that. I believe your freedom is a God-given right, and I don't believe that a politician should be able to regulate or control that. And so you're asking me, do I want a bill or do I want the government to give me more freedom? Well, I'm all for more freedom, but the problem is I've never seen a politician in my life ever give something for free in a bill. They give you something, and there's always some caveat or consequence that comes with that. And whenever you give the government power to give you that freedom, well, now you've just given them the legitimacy to take it away. And that's what we don't want. We don't want them to be able to take away your freedoms. We don't want them to give the power to take away your religious rights. We don't want to see that. And we'll be out here fighting for that as long as we can. Thank you.
By way of follow-up, Mr. Harris, what would you say to those who would say that the right of your fist ends where my nose begins?
I have to ask you to define it a little bit more.
Well,
answer that.
You say that people have freedoms,
Yeah.
a freedom to do X. What happens when the expression of that freedom comes into conflict with the freedom of someone else's? In other words, I'm using the metaphor of this is John Stuart Mill, my fist in your nose. Do I have the right to punch you, or does your nose have rights, the right not to bleed?
So there's actually a good answer to this. Libertarians believe in something called the non-aggression principle, which basically believes that you as an individual are in control of your life and not others. You can't make a decision for other people unless they also consent to those issues. And we have a problem where people believe that they're able to, want to be able to take control of other people's lives, to be able to limit what they can or cannot do. And most of the time, that limit comes at the value of unconsensual agreements between people, whether it be, I don't consent to being punched in the face, I don't consent to being shot, I don't consent to any of these things. And that is not freedom, because you've now taken my freedom away by using that ability. So we believe that you have the freedom as an individual to make your own choices and to not make it for others.
Okay. I think I learned this non-aggression principle by its previous name, which was called the categorical imperative when I studied it. It was Immanuel Kant who came up with that. But in any event, Mr. Willerton, do you care to comment about this? That the idea that this non-aggression, that I can't do X unless I can will it as a universal law for all other humans? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I won't say a lot, but I believe that freedom is the natural state of man, and when we have it, we'll fight to the death to get it back. And that includes my freedom to swing my arms around, but my freedoms end an inch from your nose. I grew up with that. It's a generational thing, yes. Michael. So I believe in allowing people the greatest level of freedom possible, to live in a way that, until it affects other people, and in a healthy way. We don't want to encourage unhealthy lifestyles that lead to people's premature demise and so on and so forth. We want to be cognizant of the effect on future generations and promote lifestyles that contribute to our growth and well-being, not to our demise and our demographic cliff. I'll end with that.
Mr. Abraham, I'm going to ask you to maybe finish off this discussion. Do you support the principle that the government should not determine what speech is acceptable except in cases of direct incitement to violence?
Do I direct the principle that the government should
Be able to determine what speech is acceptable except in cases of direct incitement to violence? In other words, using the metaphor of the fist and the nose, should the government be able to decide how that is negotiated?
Well, I'll just say this positivist argument that comes out of the libertarian framework, let's say, the challenge with it is that it distills all kind of human interaction down to the most basal level of harm versus non-harm. And our society is not based only on that. I mean, this lady here has just made a point. Part of our freedom is because we allow the release of force to protect it. That is not necessarily a libertarian decision. And I'll tell you something. The other facet of this is that this libertarian framework, it diminishes all of the other values that are a part of our cultural DNA, like being good neighbors and having a value to community, and being someone of good conscience, someone like who we're talking about here. And I'm not just moonlighting off of what that lady said, because I heard her passion, but there's a part of being a part of a community and a nation that calls upon duty, an obligation to our fellow men, and that's what makes a nation strong. And so I think we need to look at that. And I'll take just a few seconds and say the classic example of a libertarian argument was what I observed in the election in 2021. And I don't want to pick on the PPC because they're not here, but it was a PPC candidate called David Yeo. And he ran in that election. He ran in an Ottawa riding. And he basically ran on a libertarian, optimized freedom framework. And as he ran in that election, what was discovered afterwards was that he was the individual that was actually designing the ArriveCan app to actually put into lockdown the people that were traveling in and out of this country and being paid incredibly for it. And that is where, for me, I have a duty to my fellow man, and I find that bondage that was created with that cage offensive. And that's where this argument, with respect, my friend, fails, because there's more than just that distilled down discussion of what all I have to do is worry about what hat's at the end of my arm. We are more than that.
Thank you, Mr. Abraham. Mr. Abraham, out of fairness to the other candidates, we need to try to stick to the time constraints. Mr. Harris, you wanted to comment?
Asking if I could have a rebuttal to that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, I mean, first of all, the People's Party are hypocrites, first and foremost. That's one of the reasons why I'm not running with them. I'm running with the Libertarians. But I would say one thing as well, too. What is stopping with using the non-aggression principle, what is stopping you from being a good neighbor using the non-aggression principle? And also the non-aggression principle is not saying that you need to be a pacifist, that you need to sit down and let someone else take advantage of you. No, it believes you and it allows you to give you the right, inherent right to your own body. And that includes self-defense. I believe in this country, we need to have a castle doctrine, or belief that we need to be able to defend ourselves. And that comes with the belief that we can't just allow anyone to punch ourselves in the face or punch someone else in the face. If someone comes after me with a stick, I'm going to come after them with an AR-15. Thank you.
Mr. Willerton, would you care to comment?
Negative, no. Okay. I don't want to get in a fight. Yeah.
Apparently he's accepted the non-aggression idea.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the last topic of questioning before we give each of you an opportunity to deliver your closing address. It's leadership and local representation. And each of you, in your own ways this evening, have talked about values. And this next question really points to that. I'm going to start with Mr. Willerton because he decided to forgo his opportunity at rebuttal there. Mr. Willerton, the terms honorable and right honorable once meant something in Canadian politics. How would you bring back a sense of honor, integrity, and service to public office?
By doing what I say, meaning what I say, and doing what I say at the end of the day. And promoting life, liberty, and family, and health of society. And I think that you call politicians honorable. They have attained the position. I suppose they deserve that. But it would help if they behaved honorably and promoted an honorable outcome. And I would obviously do that. My objective. Fixing Canada is my aim. And making it healthy again, and making it a great place to live, work, and raise your family. So I think I would hopefully qualify for the adjective of honorable.
Mr. Harris, how would you answer that question?
Well, I would generally say that most politicians are not honorable. If you look at any politician right now, they're any level, they're corruptible. They're a man after all. Man is full of greed. That is one of our sins. You look at any politician right now, I'll tell you, they have done something wrong in their career. The best way that we can be better representatives and better politicians for you is to, as I would like to say, do the Javier Milei approach, who is a libertarian, by the way, the president of Argentina. His idea is you don't dilly-dally on your promises. When you make promises, you do it, and you do it as soon as possible. You don't wait 3 years till the next election comes, and you do it the final year to say, oh, I did my promises, guys, vote for me this time. No, you do it within the first month. Even if that means you got nothing else to do for the next 2 years, you sure as hell better get your policies in order and do it. And like I said, how I, as a member of parliament, would act with that honorableness would be to not work for myself, but for the community by not taking a pension, not taking a wage, and making sure that everything that I do in my office would be transparent and open to the public. Thank you.
Mr. Abraham, how would you restore honor, integrity, and a sense of service to public office?
Our nation has a famine of truth and accountability in its public servants. Canadians have almost given up on politics as a solution. And the country is so hopeless and angry right now, it blows my mind. And for me, I think if I were your MP, I'm going to do the same thing that I'm doing now, which is continue to meet you face to face, hold the town halls that I'm doing without pre-screening who comes in, and letting you ask any question you want to about whatever's going on. I'm going to keep my constituency office open and guarantee that there's at least 3 town halls, if not 4 a year, where people can actually come together and talk, and have an accessible email address that I answer for constituents only that you sign up for, but you'll be guaranteed a response within 10 days. And I think that's the only way, because what we're losing right now is the face-to-face trust between politicians and their community, and this community right now knows it better than most. And we're looking at an election that if Mr. Poilievre is elected, you'll have someone from Ottawa who is here with an agenda to continue the things that you hate, and you could very well be in another by-election in February or March because there's a leadership review. And so I'm going to be here to fight for this riding and this province.
By way of follow-up, Mr. Abraham, if there were a conflict between your party's position, your personal conscience, and what your constituents want, how would you resolve that discord? How would you decide to vote on a particular issue?
Well, I've crossed this bridge because I was inside the Conservative Party and I saw what was happening as a vice president of an electoral district association inside the Conservative Party, because I could see a lot of good Canadians taking thought and concern and trying to push it up into the party to influence and bring their values back into the national discussion for policy to be created and law to be created. And I saw particularly people in my riding trying to engage discussions about abortion in particular, and it was being pushed up and it was constantly thwarted. And now we have a Pierre Poilievre telling us that there's no agenda to ever change abortion 100%. And so I guess, you know what, you'll have to forgive me. What was the rest of that question?
We wanted to know, I asked, how would you resolve a conflict between your personal conscience
Yes.
and the party's position, and perhaps what your constituents want.
Right, so this party has been designed as a grassroots, bottom-up party, so that it's actually the people pushing the policy up. And that's a mainstay because of what I saw inside the party, and that's why our country's breaking down, because there's a disconnection. And we've got to reestablish that connection between the actual voting constituents and their elected candidate.
Mr. Harris, what about you? When facing a vote in Parliament, which would take priority for you? Your party's directives, your personal conscience, or the clearly expressed wishes of your constituents? And if you can you provide us of an example where you might break from party lines?
I first and foremost, I'm here as a representative of you guys. I'm not here to be your boss. I'm here to be your representative. You guys are my boss. I'm not your boss. You guys want something, you call me, and I'll do it for you. I would probably say, I'd probably break from my party on a couple of things, because I know there's a lot that can be done in terms of infrastructure redevelopment for our rural communities, repaving roads, repairing our water lines. There's a very big issue with sewage, whereas dumping into our groundwater because the government's not repairing that stuff. I'd probably break on those lines. I'd help to repair our rural community and help make sure that we have the proper infrastructure. But at the end of the day, community comes first, and that's what I'm here for.
Mr. Willerton, how would you answer the question?
I would say that I would vote my conscience, and but I would be very clear about the positions that I take in my campaign and so on and so forth, so you know where I stand. And if there are areas in which we disagree and you can convince me that you're right and I'm wrong, my conscience is off kilter somehow, I'd be happy to listen to your points of view and take them into consideration. But as far as disagreeing with the party, I don't know if that would ever happen. I like it. I could have written their platform myself.
Gentlemen, is there any need for rebuttal in terms of this topic? Anybody like to comment on the answers that one of your opponents has given? If not, then I would propose to move on and give each of you an opportunity to make some closing statements. Rather than showing favoritism, I propose to move alphabetically, which works out from left to right. Mr. Abraham, would you like to provide us with your closing statement?
This name's been the scourge of my life for that reason. Well, look, the bottom line here is that you're facing a continuation. If we do the same thing that we've always done in Western Canada and revert back to our little blue comfort blanket and vote Conservative, what we're doing is we're going to be electing someone who is going to pander to votes in Ontario and then ask you to pay for them while our country is unraveling. And I don't want you to forget that metaphor, that picture of us balancing, and the boat that we're balancing on is being sunk. And so I'm asking Albertans to see the bigger picture and to look at this differently and say we have to respond differently. This is a beachhead for freedom for our entire nation if Alberta can actually become independent and strong and re-establish the values that built this nation and the ones that you're all mourning as you see this country unravel. And that's what I'm trying to do and wanting to do here for you as a starting point. And I only think that this discussion about the two Canadas, we're really choosing between the two Canadas, the one that we love and the one that is becoming, that this nation's becoming by all of these changes that are being unchallenged. And so what I want to do is challenge them. I have people ask me, why would we elect one guy? And I said, you've had 144 other guys or ladies who have not said anything. You've been muzzled. They've been muzzled and whipped. And what we need is one person with a platform that's going to fight actually for the liberty of all Canadians, but starting here. And I can tell you, I've got 17 seconds left, that there are Canadians across this entire country that are hoping that you have the fight for us to stand up and do something different in Alberta. They're looking to us.
Mr. Harris?
we have a uni party right now, whether it be the Conservatives, Liberals, or New Democrats, that believe that they owe your vote. That if you don't vote for them, it's a waste of a vote. And at the same time, as Abraham said, if you don't vote for us, well, guess what? It's a waste of a vote in their opinion. But guess what? They, for the last probably couple centuries here, have been elected. And what exactly have they done for our communities? What exactly have they done to support the people here? I don't see Per Polyev coming up on this stage talking with you guys. I don't see Darcy coming on this stage to talk with you guys. And I sure as hell don't see either of them talking about the issues that are affecting this community. Whether it be the issues of supply management, where farmers are losing their land, ancestral land, because they're not allowed to actually use it. That whether it be the Eastern governments taking advantage of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Alberta through equalization, I don't see them taking a stand on those. I don't see it at all. I don't see any of these people taking a stand on self-determination for Alberta or for any of the provinces here in Western Canada. And so if you believe in the ideas of liberty, family, and independence, I will be here every single day to fight for you and to bring your voice to Parliament and bring it to Ottawa on your behalf. Thank you.
Mr. Willerton, yours is the final word.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're called to be salt and light. I want to take this opportunity to shine a light on how the Tories and Liberals have been working together for years to create the mess in which we find ourselves today. Brian Mulroney, for instance, signed the Rio Declaration in 1992, leading directly to Justin Trudeau's carbon tax in 2019. In 2007, both Stephen Harper and Pierre Poilievre signed the United Nations Sustainability Act, leading to Chrystia Freeland declaring a third of Alberta off limits to development just a few years ago. And in 2009, the same Stephen Harper signed off on legislation regarding the labeling of food and drugs that paved the way for the Red Team's assault on our natural health products in 2023. So one party sets up the shot, the other takes it. Sometimes they'll even work together directly, like when they to the man supported Bill C-4 in 2021, which could see a person locked up for 5 years just for telling little Johnny that he's a boy. So between aborting our future, euthanizing our past, sexually mutilating our youth, and silencing our criticism thereof, what we're witnessing today is an attack on our most cherished freedoms and an assault on the very gift of life itself, all brought to you courtesy of both major parties. So to fix Canada, we need to think outside the box, and that's where you'll find the Christian Heritage Party that's dedicated to protecting life, family, and freedom. On life, CHP is dedicated to protecting innocent human life from conception to natural death. On family, marriage will once again be defined as that relationship that exists between one man and one woman to the exclusion of all others. And under a CHP government, freedom of speech will be restored, as without it we have no way of defending our other rights. As C.S. Lewis once said, when you're on the wrong road, the right thing to do is turn around, find the right road, and continue thereon. Clearly we're on the wrong road, bouncing between the blue team and the red team. I believe that the Christian Heritage Party of Canada is that right choice, and I think you will too. Our party website is chp.ca. My campaign website is jeffwillerton.ca. I think you'll enjoy them both, and I ask for your vote. Thank you, and God bless.
I want to thank you, gentlemen, for attending here today and being so clear and thoughtful in your answers. Especially want to thank everyone who's here in person, who participated, and those viewing and listening online. Unfortunately, we don't have time to take questions from the audience who's in attendance here. However, as Mr. Willerton alluded to, each of these gentlemen have social media where you can contact them. I expect that they would be very pleased to answer your questions, or they have people who will do that for them. If there's no objection from the people who invited me here, I'd like to leave everyone with a closing comment. At the outset of the evening, I cautioned everyone that I had a particular allegiance to a particular leader. And so I'd like to leave everyone with a closing thought along those lines. What is needed now in Canada are Christians who pose, or what is needed now are Christians who pose a growing threat to the enemies of God. Not by militancy, which each of you have commented on, but by difference. Christians whose culture is visibly distinct from that of the godless. Christians who stand with courage, who serve as salt and light in a decaying world, in a decaying country with decaying values, which each of you has spoken to in your own ways. Christians who live as if Christ actually redeemed them, a holy people commissioned to build his kingdom here and now, right here in Canada. But such lives are only possible when lived coram Deo, before the face of God, in reverent belief that he is who he has revealed himself to be. Thank you very much, and good evening.
We've got Sean Buckley Tanner. We've got Michael Wagner here.